Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 358. I'm delighted to welcome back onto the podcast my co-host Jordan Tyra. How are we, Jordan?
Good, thank you. Yeah, very glad to be back and looking forward to another one.
Awesome. And we have got, I just said we've got Jordan Squared on the podcast today because we are joined by Jordan Fagbola. How are you, Jordan?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on, mate. This is going to be a real interesting episode. We'll go into you and your background in a second, but I know we've got some mutual connections and friends we've just been catching up on, which might come up in the episode. So it's great to have you on the podcast, mate. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you very much.
Jordan, will you kick us off? We always start with backgrounds, finding a little bit about yourself. Can you take us back and give us a bit of a rundown on yourself to start with?
Yeah, of course. So my background is football. So as a player and then transitioning into a practitioner still playing. So came through similar to most people, Sunday League, came through the academies at Rochdale. Didn't get a pro there, ended up at Stockport County for quite a few years. Then I went to Colwyn Bay, Solihull, FC United. Then I was at Hyde for 5 years, and then a couple of other teams, and now I'm at Trafford. So I'm still playing in the non-league circuit. Alongside that, kind of 2014, I started my sports science degree through the PFA. So we did a lot of it distance learning, funded by the PFA, which was really good. Finished that. It took 4.5 years, so it was 18 months for a full-time year. Completed that, and then I wanted to specialize in something. So the natural choices were either obviously S&C, nutrition, psychology. Nutrition was always the one that stood out to me, both just as an interest, but also selfishly. That was one that I knew could improve my own personal career. So I went into that and studied the masters, which we finished in 2019. And then we all know what happened early 2020. And then that just kind of accelerated my progression into I could really start this as a business and a consultancy working with. At first, I wanted to work with athletes that weren't in football because I wanted to do something that was a little bit different. And I knew growing up in football, it wasn't as well received as some other sports. So, for example, rugby, weight making sports where it's really important, the nutrition's kind of at the top of the kind of background team support versus football, where at that time it wasn't really well received. So I thought I'd go into some other sports where you're going to get a little bit more out of it and there's a bit more buy-in already. Naturally, I obviously reverted back to football. That's the world that I've known. And I looked at it after probably 6 to 8 months and I thought, what am I doing? Like, I understand this. I've done half my life in football. Why would I throw away all that experience and try and learn something completely new? Go in and speak to people where they know I'm not quite as in line with everything that's going on as I'm in football, which I don't have to think about, or what happens here, or it's just naturally within me because I've gone through that. So now I'd say it's probably flipped, and the vast majority of my clients are footballers, and then I've got a few other sports as well. But it's my thing's always like we spoke about before, taking the research, taking what footballers are currently doing, and bringing those as close together as possible. Because I think the research is very sterile and it's easy to control everything in a lab, and you think, right, well, we can have this amount of food and we can do it at this time. When you factor in training times, weather, if you've got kids, traffic, fatigue, all these other factors which a player is going to go through throughout the course of a season and a career, then it becomes really difficult of like, I'm now miles away from this and I'm just stuck nowhere. So I try to give the guidance on that to kind of bring you as close as possible to what the research is in the most realistic way. That's not going to be too much of a chore.
Yeah, this is why it's going to be a really interesting episode because Jordan and I, we always enjoy these episodes, which is like real life situations. And I'm sure you'll give some examples shortly of some challenges that players face. And the other side of it is that you can still speak from your perspective as well as a player. So
Yeah.
that's why it's going to be really interesting to dive into that. Jordan, let me just take you back because I think it was interesting what you said about the PFA and
Yeah.
the sports science degree that you got through the support of the PFA. Can you talk through, because if there's anyone listening we might have some players listening that might be getting towards the end of their careers, or even they just want to upskill themselves whilst playing. What was that process like for you? Was it sort of led by you? Was it like encouraged by them? Like what sort of process did you go through?
To be honest, I think it was led by me in terms of finding it because it wasn't. I think now it's a lot better advertised than it was because we're talking about kind of 11, 12 years ago. So obviously with the rise of social media and that type of thing, it's a lot easier to access and know what's available. But what had happened is we'd gone part-time as a club at Stockport. So I had loads of time during my day. I'd gone from full-time to now part-time, and I thought, I've I don't know what to do with all this time. So I can either go and get a job, or I'm still young enough where my overheads are not massive. I can go and study and then build a career for after football. But at the same time, I was looking at it as I can also enhance my own career because if I know a little bit more about the sports science and how everything works, I can use that myself to kind of boost my own performance. So I started looking around and I've always been into athletics, track and field. So as a child, that was kind of my first sport, and I wanted to go into that before football. So I've always followed Michael Johnson, and I know that he had his performance center. So it's like that's kind of what I want to go into, that area of things. So what can I find that's gonna put me on that pathway? Just so happened that the PFA were doing a course with MMU where they were funding 90%, something like that. I think it's a bit less now, but it's still well funded. So then I ended up contacting the PFA and saying, obviously, I've been a member through when I was at Rochdale. What's the situation with this? And they said, oh, you need to do an application, whatever. Then did the application, went in for the open day. I had obviously all the qualifications from going through the youth team at Rochdale and having the BTEC in sport, reference from the club, that type of thing. Then, apart from that, it was kind of normal to a normal uni application. You kind of send your grades, apply, they get back to you with the offer, you accept everything, and then it was distance learning. So what they did was, at the time, they sent you out an iPad which was preloaded with all these videos, ebooks, and resources, and then you had a bit of a stretched out timetable because, like I said, it was 18 months for a full-time year. So first year you do physiology, psychology, and biomechanics, but it would be majority similar to this, but not live. So it would be a pre-recorded video and you're working through an ebook and you've got access to the tutors, but obviously they're lecturing in real time, in real life. So it was very limited. So a lot of it was self-taught and self-developed and just speaking with either other people on the course or other practitioners that were more advanced in that field than me just to kind of learn that way, which I've found interesting because I always learn better from conversations and reading something, putting my spin on it, speaking with somebody else, seeing their perspective, and then building it up that way. But then the PFA were really good with us because when I went on, so the actual campus was in Crewe. They've moved it now to Platt Lane, but it was in Alsager, I think. So we went over there, and there was some. I think there was a couple of Premier League players, a few of us from the lower leagues, and then there was other people that weren't through the PFA as well. So it was a good mix. But what we did was we'd learn throughout the year, and then 1 week in kind of June, July, they'd bring us all in and we'd do lab skills. So you'd actually get some hands-on practical, interact with everyone and do it that way. But no, I found it really enjoyable, and I think if you are looking, I know that the PFA have got more courses than just that one now. They've kind of branched out and you can do loads of different things. And if you want to do kind of a trade, they'll give you a bursary as well. So it is massively helpful for players that are coming out of the full-time game or they just want to upskill themselves in preparation for my career's coming towards and then what's going to be my next steps.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think it's just important to highlight that, isn't it, Jordan? Jordan Tyra, because I think that we speak a lot about people getting into like sports science, S&C, and I think a lot of it does come off the back of like your interests in sport or your own performance, doesn't it? Which has obviously led you down that line of upskilling and then I'm sure you've applied plenty to yourself as well as the people that you work with as well. But it's just interesting in terms of where that starts and where that interest sort of sparks. But I think it is also important to highlight that option that is out there for, like you mentioned, players that are currently playing. But it doesn't have to necessarily be at the end of the career, does it? Like they can upskill. And I know we've probably spoken to players that are constantly looking at ways of improving and pushing. And we even spoke about in the last episode, didn't we, Jordan, about the players getting private coaches and all that sort of stuff, but just generally upskilling and getting more education around what they're doing and why. So I think it's just important to highlight that is an option out there.
No, definitely. I'd agree. I think it gives us the option as both practitioners and players, the communication on the lines of that improve. Because if the player understands a little bit more about, let's say, their own loading or their own nutrition and what they're trying to achieve, it becomes so much easier for it to kind of get that message across without having to over explain or do too much.
And just to dive in on the back of that, I just wanted to say as well, I think you've hit the nail on the head a little bit, Ben, and both and Jordan as well, in terms of doing it before the end of the career. Because I've known lads who, similar to yourself a little bit, weren't offered pros at clubs, and then they've just gone down the traditional uni route, and they thought it was either or a little bit, and it was I'm going to drop out of football because I need to go into uni. But I think that's a great option to show we don't have to drop out of football. You can still play football, and you can also get, like I say, that upskill in yourself as well at the same time, looking potentially further down the line. Because both Ben and I have worked with a lot of youth players, and typically education is at the back of the mind. Usually, 9 times out of 10, um, and to the point where I work with a lot of youth players now privately, and it's like, oh, I don't need education. I'll just be a footballer, and that, yeah, it's hard with you, that one, because you're sort of going, I hope you are. Like, please do prove that wrong. That again, prove the stats wrong. But at the end of the day, you're going to need something, because your career isn't going to go until you're 65. So you're going to need something in terms of what you want to look at. So I think highlighting, and thank you for doing that, the PFA options and how that is an option for a lot of current players is a really important thing. So they can maybe, oh, hang on, get their head up and think about what's next already, if you like. So yeah, I think that's great to highlight that.
No, definitely. And I think there's the other thing about that is I know I've played with a lot of players as my career's progressed that are tradesmen, and I know that the PFA have started to go down that route as well, because a lot of the time it is a little bit more flexible around if you're playing versus a traditional unit or a traditional course. So they've kind of grown with the times as well, the PFA, and said like we'll also provide for certain tradesman courses or whatever it is, whether it's plumbing, electrician, that type of thing. So there is something for everyone. There is, regardless of what your interest is, it doesn't have to be sports science. It's just that is kind of an easy jump to make from where you are as a player.
And like you said, it translates into you supporting yourself, doesn't it? And upskilling on what you're doing and why. Um, like I said on this episode, it's interesting because we can flick between Jordan the player and Jordan the practitioner a little bit, and I want to pull into on the player side, because we were speaking before we started recording, and you said how much football had transitioned and changed over the time that you've been involved. So can you touch on that a little bit? Firstly, on like on pitch in terms of like styles of play and what's actually happening during a game, but also off pitch as well. Have you seen differences with the players that you play with? Obviously, there's yourself who's upskilled as a practitioner, but just in terms of preparation by some of the players that you play with as well. Can you touch on both sides of that for us?
Yeah, I think on the pitch it's changed massively, probably, and it's only recently I looked back because obviously when you're in it, it's kind of hard to remove yourself and see the bigger picture. But I was at my mum's, funnily enough, a few weeks ago, and we've been in the loft, and I found some DVDs which were from my last year at Rochdale, so when I was a second year scholar, and my first year pro at Stockport. I thought, I'll have a look at these just to see. I put them on. I thought, there's something about this game that it looks different. It looks weird. Watching. I thought, I've got it. I know what it is. You couldn't receive the ball in the box from a goal kick as a defender. I'm thinking, why is everybody stood so far apart? What's going on? And the ball's going long, and I'm thinking, it almost looks alien now. But as I'm watching it, I'm remembering the thought process of what was going on the day. But then now looking at it as me 10 years, 12 years on, it's whoa, this has changed so much because it's like now, and we mentioned it before, everyone wants to try and play in what they term is the right way, which it's all subjective. Like if someone wants to go more direct and they win a game, there's nothing to say that that's the wrong way versus somebody that wants to play 1,000 passes. It's just that one might be more appealing to an audience than the other. But I think football has definitely changed in that sense in England. We play a lot more now in terms of possession and keeping the ball and different types of formations and shapes. But I think the other thing is the ball's generally just in play more. So because you've gone from more aerial duels and more work defend first to now teams are taking a little bit more of a risk and they want to keep possession. The ball's in play more, which means that you're having to do more movement, more running anyway. But from my perspective as a player, the biggest difference has been what's available in terms of analysis and what you've got going into a game and what your plan is. So when I was coming through kind of early 2010s, you were very limited in scouting report. It was probably somebody had gone to the game and it was he'd written 3 or 4 A4 sheets. No, this player's right-footed, the whatever height, these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses. But that's based on one game, on one person's opinion, and you've got no visual. So what you deem as this player is really fast and skillful might not be the same as what I do. So I might be going into the game thinking, he's told me that this guy's lightning. And he turns up and I think actually he's reasonably slow. So we've prepared for this whole thing and we've done a week on we stop him from getting in behind and actually he wouldn't have done that anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas now you've got video at all levels, so even down to kind of step 6, step 7, you've got VO, you've got highlights of the games, you've got interviews, you've got kind of reports and profiles on players. So you go into the game much more equipped and you kind of have a bit of an understanding better. Before we were relying a lot on the manager knows the other manager. This is typically his style. We've got an idea of some of the players. Whereas now you can go and look yourself. As a player, if you want to spend an hour or 2 hours during your week visualizing and looking at what you're going to see on the Saturday, you can do that. Whereas before, it was unavailable.
And do you see that now, John? Because obviously, I'm guessing for yourself, you're going to be taking that time and looking into those details from your experience and also how things have changed and what's available now for you as well. But for your teammates and especially probably younger teammates as well, are you seeing that as a change in terms of preparation on the analysis side? And then we can touch on like the nutrition and everything else as well.
I think there's a change, but because they've come through only knowing that they don't notice that there's a change. Because obviously
Yeah.
that's all they've ever known. For me, it's I can see what it was like before to what it's like now, but they just see, oh, this is normal. The other thing is because everybody's on social media, a lot of the players know each other now.
Mm.
Whereas before, if you were going kind of outside of your 10, 15 mile radius, you probably didn't know anybody on the other squad. Whereas now it's like, oh, I know we're playing against this team this weekend. This guy's on 12 goals and he always comes in on his left foot and it's whatever. So you know a lot about players straight away, whereas before you were having to problem solve a bit more on the pitch. So I think there is a pro and con of it because a lot of the players have been brought up and it's so much analysis and data. They don't always have that problem solving when they come up against something that they weren't expecting. But equally, you need to be equipped going into the game so you've got some sort of idea and you're able to do something yourself in terms of a plan. But I think, yeah, flipping on to kind of the nutrition side of things, massively different in terms of what I've seen players, and even myself, because obviously when I first came through, I didn't have the knowledge, and coming through at Rochdale, which was League One, League Two at the time, didn't have the resources or anybody in doing nutrition, so you were kind of left to your own devices, what your coach knew and what you felt with. Whereas now, there's nutritionists in everywhere, so even if you've not got a nutritionist in your club, you can find someone like me online. There's a lot of information, which again you've now gone from I don't have any information to I have so much information, which is the right information to listen to. But players are a lot more switched on to it now and they want to know more. So I get the young lads coming to me, George, what do you think about this? No, I've seen this online. Is this right if I want to do this before a game in terms of adding this as a pre-match meal? Or what do you think about this at halftime? And there's a lot more questions around it now because people are more aware, which is always positive. But we just need to be aware, like I said, of making sure that we're giving out quality information that's actually going to benefit the players rather than something on social media that's just to sell something and just to make us money.
And you mentioned as well, which I'm sure we'll go into, that when we were talking about the topics, you were talking about realistic habits and things that players could do, which I think is the other important thing, isn't it? Because yes, if players have got all the time in the world, all the resources in the world, it might be a little bit different. But if you're talking to players that haven't got that are maybe working alongside playing and all the rest of it, you've got to understand their situation, their circumstance, and apply something that's going to be realistic as well, haven't you? So off the back of that, Jordan, what are some of the main challenges you just mentioned around match days, pre-match, halftime, those sorts of times? What are some of the challenges or the most common challenges that you get players coming to you with?
I think players just understanding, everybody now really, or the majority understand the principles of a carb load. Like they understand they need to have more carbs on a match day -1 because it's going to fuel my match day. But no one really understands the numbers. So you'll speak to players, or I'll speak to players on an initial consultation or just in an off conversation, and it's, well, what are you doing in your match day -1? What does that look like? Like, oh, I'm really loading up my carbs. Let's go through your day. I'm thinking, you way off it. No,
Mm.
you've really, it just looks like a normal day, and you've added one big bowl of pasta for your evening meal versus a medium bowl of pasta.
Yeah,
That's not really going to make that much of a difference. So a lot of the time, the biggest problem that I find with players when I speak to them, and this is Premier League internationals all the way down to part-time step six, weekend warriors, five-a-side. I'm yet to find somebody that's fueling at 70% or more of what we'd want them to be at. It's always 40, 50%. And then we're wondering why we're getting to 70 minutes into a game and really struggling. Or we're just not able to perform consistently, sorry. Because what you'll find is, I think in football especially, you've got some players that they're playing below the level that they should. So you can kind of get away with it. Of I'm so technically good, or I read the game so well that even though my fueling's not quite there, my performances are standing above everybody else. But obviously, because you should be playing 2 levels higher based on your talent and your career. So what we need to do is fuel you so that you can actually go and do what you need to do and perform at that top level. So I think the biggest difference is kind of structuring that day and letting them know this is what an actual carb load looks like. And then you kind of branch off from that between your players that don't really have a massive appetite, some that want 3 square meals and maybe a snack, some that want to eat 6 small meals. And then you can really get into the individual beliefs around that and what we want to do in terms of, let's say us three are going to have similar amounts of carbs. It would look completely different based on the actual food.
yeah,
But just getting those numbers into the players and letting them understand, right, this is what you were having before. We're going to add this in. And you're not going to go from kind of 3 grams per kilo to 8 straight away. It's impossible. But if we go from 3 grams to 5 grams and they notice, wow, like I felt a lot better. I got to 80 minutes and I wasn't blowing. I wasn't looking around thinking, how long's left? What's going on? I felt like I could get through the game. Then it's like, right, I've got that buy-in now. They've seen that instant result. What do we do on the back of that to keep building it? And the other thing for me is if you fuel well, kind of your recovery starts with your fueling. If you fuel poorly and you blow up at 70 minutes, you're finished. So you're trying to recover from 0% and you've not even completed the 90 minutes to start off with. Whereas if we've fueled you well, you'll get through the 90 minutes and 95 minutes, whatever it is. And yeah, you're going to be tired, you're going to be fatigued, but if you've still got 5-10% reserves, it's a lot easier for us to recover from that, both nutritionally and also the following day active recovery. You're going to be more likely to get up and do something like that versus you get up on the Sunday and you've just come off at 70 minutes with cramp or with fatigue, and it's, I need another day to rest and I need another day. The games come too quickly for you to be doing that. So that extra day of rest, now you're back into a match day -1 again. Tuesday game, and it just becomes this massive cycle where either you get dropped from the team because your performances are poor, or your risk of injury just becomes way too high.
Jordan, it's in exact line with the conversation that we had at our conferences, isn't it, in terms of fueling and carbohydrates?
100%. And I just wanted to jump on 2 points really. But the one on the underfueling, I think, is I don't think can be overstated. Like we see it at the hub with Liam, who's our nutritionist. He's also Bournemouth nutritionist as well. He's part time there. Um, and he is just constant. Every athlete that he works privately with at the hub, 100% same as you, Jordan. They're just massively underfueled, 100%. And then all the youngsters in the academy. I've forgotten the piece of research, I've forgotten who put it out, so apologies in advance. But it broke down sort of daily calorie needs for under 13s, under 15s, under 17s, and I think that it shocked a lot. It shocked a lot of people, and it has done when I've said to an under 15 player, "You're going to need 3.5, maybe even 4,000 calories on a match day."
Yeah.
The kids are like, "What?" And getting them out of the mindset that, and the parents obviously for youngsters as well. Parents are obviously looking at the back of a packet of anything, and they're seeing, average recommended daily allowance for men is 2,500 in it, and then women it's 2,000, and they're thinking, oh well, that's what I need to give my 15-year-old, essential athlete, even at 15, they're pretty much growing athlete as well, and depending on the level they're playing at, essentially a full-time athlete in academies and things. So, oh yeah, 2,500 calories a day, that'd be fine, and the under per day, potentially under fueling by 1,500 calories. You add that up over a week, over a month, over a season, and there's going to be knock-on effects. So that underfueling thing, I think it can't be overstated in that. And I love the fact you brought that up. But the second point I wanted to jump on, which I love as well, was that players are playing under the level they could probably achieve or play at. We saw that over pre-season with all our testing. We had a brilliant pre-season of testing, literally step 3, step 4, step 5, and step 6 teams, and there was a genuine, obvious difference in terms of the physical stats. So we're talking speed, jump height, and CMJ, and then all the characteristics that can come around a valve, force decks and stuff. Yo-yo testing, 505 testing. So your typical sort of Premier League testing battery. The difference between step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6 was actually quite obvious, and there was sort of significant differences between them. So what you're saying there, in terms of if you've got like a step 4 player who's reading the game well, can sort of get away with it a little bit. You knew that if you picked him up and dropped him into a step 3, the physical demand is higher.
Yeah.
So therefore, they're going to have to try and bridge that gap, and probably the easiest win in the way of doing that is going to be just fueling properly, isn't it? So I think that's a really, really good point, because I think a lot of players would be obsessed with, I'm not fit enough. And we've all heard gaffers, haven't we? We know many gaffers. They're not fit enough. They're not fit enough. They're not fit enough. And then you actually speak to the players, and you go, "When was the last time you ate?" Like, "Oh, lunchtime," and it's a 7 o'clock kickoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going, well, yeah, you could be as fit as you want. You could be the fittest player on this pitch right now. I don't think you're actually going to perform at your best anyway. So, yeah, I just wanted to jump on those 2 points because I think they're really, really important. And I think, yeah, any players who haven't thought about the fueling side of things yet, it's an easy win, isn't it? And I bet, just a question for you, Jordan. Then I bet you must see quite quick improvements in performance just by fixing the fueling, quite simple fixes in terms of just the amount of carbs or the timing. Do you see a massive initial improvement and then it sort of plateaus, or is it just a steady improvement?
Yeah, I think it's the easiest win, but it's the biggest hurdle you need to overcome anyway. So it's not as if you're using it as a bit of a gimmick. It does give you the buy-in that you need. So it is one that you would probably go with first anyway. But because everything's geared towards match day. Doesn't matter what you're doing during the week, everything's focused around. You could have 5 days great in training, and then you dropped for the match and you're fuming. Your whole week's ruined. So we always want to make sure that that match day is perfect. So once we get that fueling right and we've taken it from, let's say, 40, 50% to 70, 80%, we know we're still not there. But that massive jump for them is like, well, I could only get to 65 minutes before, and I was worrying about how many times I went into break into the box. I got there and I felt like I could still go as much as I wanted. Then they're like, oh, I really get it now. This nutrition thing works. And that can be immediate. let's say we started working together and it's today Monday. By Saturday, we could have you in that versus Saturday just gone. So the difference will be massive. And then after that, like you say, it does plateau a little bit and the jumps become a bit smaller, but there's still things that you can really improve. It's just with nutrition, it's not always as visible as with some other kind of disciplines in sports science. But I think, yeah, back to the point that you made, the paper was Marcus Hannon at Everton.
So, yeah.
And I remember one of the outliers, I think he was in the under 15s, I'm sure it was over 4,000.
Mm.
It's funny because I do a lot of similar to yourself, speaking with youth athletes and parents, and it's always funny when you've got the mum, the dad, and the athlete's 14, 15, and we're talking, and it's like, well, what do family meals look like? And it's, oh, this is this. So, right, I'm just going to stop you there. Your family meals, and I know as a dad and as a man, it's always, no, I'll have the bigger portion, then this, and it's, he needs to be having the bigger portion because
Yeah.
stature wise, he's reasonably similar. His output's way higher than yours, and also we've got to fuel his growth and his maturation. So actually, we're probably going to be dividing it this way. And it's always the mum will be like, and dad's like, and just it makes you no less of a man. Just let that. We're trying to build him up to get to this point, and it's always an interesting topic where that's another thing that is not considered in the research. So Marcus's paper, and it's a great paper, and it's gone through everything that we need physiologically. You've then got to look at what that looks like in a realistic setting, and it's
Yeah.
I'm eating at home with mum and dad, and no, I'm the child of the scenario. I'm getting the smaller portion because I'm the child, and it's no, that needs to be flipped, and that's just an education thing, and letting the parents know and understand that. But the initial conversation is always funny because you always get the reaction from the dads of and
You're
they
not in
they
my
don't
food.
let it go. Funny.
That's this is exactly why I knew it'd be really good to get you on, though, Jordan, because those real life examples are absolutely perfect. And yeah, you're a brave man taking on that challenge, but it 100% makes sense when you break it down like that, doesn't it?
Yeah,
The other thing I wanted to ask was just other experiences. So once you've presented this under fueling to players, and I know you're working with players at different levels as well. So some that are probably going to be set like part-time semi-pro, others that are going to be full-time in academies or first teams or what have you. So I know that could be slightly different. What are some other like obstacles that they're facing at that time? So you've presented, right, we're under fueling, we need to take more fuel on. Your calories are maybe this and they need to be this. What are some things that then come back to you from there?
I think some of it going back to Jordan's point is because they've underfueled chronically. It's like Jordan said, they think they're not fit enough, or the gaffers think they're not fit enough. And I always, when in my initial consultation, it's not we're trying to get you to a certain fitness level. We need to figure out where you're at. Like where you're fatiguing at the moment is not necessarily what your physical capacity is. It might be we're just hitting this little bit of a false ceiling because you're underfueled. So we need to fuel you first so that we can really find right what's your limits. And I would say it's a little bit of a dangerous spiral where you're under fuel, you don't really perform well. They say you're not fit enough, so you train even more, which makes you further under fueled, and it just becomes this spiral which results in injury majority of the time, or just a severe burnout where you've just got to take time away from the team. Um, but the other obstacles then become how do you actually piece that together? Because everybody's got a different level of appetite, a different level of cooking skill, different preferences in food, different kind of dietary requirements. So what does the number look like? And it's not always to present the player with the number. So myself, for example, at around 100 kilos and a match day -1, I'm going to be looking at somewhere like 800 grams. If you told a player you're going to have 800 grams of carbs, the eyes will pop out their head. So it's about right. And sometimes I do. You've got to kind of read the room on what a player can handle, and that's flipping back to what we're talking about. If they've got a little bit more of an understanding of sports science anyway, you can have a little bit more of a conversation where you can include those numbers. Some other times it's just we're giving them visuals and that type of thing, but it always becomes a battle of how much fuel can you get in without maximizing your appetite. So for me, and this is where social media then becomes dangerous for players because everything on social media at the moment, from the big accounts that are not necessarily practitioners, but they're in the fitness space or they're in the health spaces, you need to be eating whole foods, you need to be eating this, get rid of all this type of stuff. And it's like, I agree to a certain extent for most of your week. I always say it's a little bit like a pendulum. So we want you to be as healthy as possible because obviously that's going to make you a better athlete, but you're a human first. But there comes a point in your week where we have to shift everything towards performance. And if we're looking purely at these whole foods, you just won't be able to get the amounts in. It's going to be too much. So we need to be looking at stuff that visually it might be more unhealthy, but that's your rocket fuel for your performance. And we know that after that, we're going to get all the nutrients back in. But you can't have it both ways all the time. You're going to miss out on something. So then we're looking at how do we kind of get those beliefs into the player? Because some of them are really fearful of, oh no, 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 like I've been indoctrinated. I can't have this sugary food or I can't have this. It needs to be brown rice. It needs to be chicken breast. It needs to be broccoli. And I'm thinking you're gonna have to eat like 3 kilos worth to get that, or you can have it this way, which doesn't look too dissimilar to what you're doing now. We've just tweaked a few things and we've changed a few of your foods, and it becomes a lot easier. The other thing is then, like you say, because I work with players of different levels, there's some will travel the day before if it's an away game and stay in the hotel. Some will travel on the day. Some are coming from work. So then it becomes logistics of we still need, if all these players are roughly similar stature, they're going to need a similar amount. But this person's got 8 hours, they've got a chef, they've got provision at the club. This person's maybe traveling on a day, we need to do a packed lunch, we need to do snacks. This person's coming straight from work and they've only got one break during their day. So what do those three look like? And just building that into someone that it's not a chore. Because I think, especially at the beginning of a relationship with a player, you need to make it as frictionless as possible. Because anything that you keep adding in and it's butting heads with their own routine, it just becomes a point of, right, we're really having to battle through this. So I always like to kind of assess what they're doing and let them know, right, these 4 things that you're doing are really great. We're keeping these 4 things in. What we're going to do is enhance them a little bit. I'm not coming in with a sledgehammer saying get rid of everything. We're doing it this way. If I've got 10 players, everyone will look completely different. So it's about tapping into what their beliefs are and what they really hold dear. Leave that bit alone. The other bits is what we can enhance. Because I've seen a lot of times where, and even myself at the beginning of my career, go in and I had this real idea of it needs to look like this. And then you try it and they're like, no, that doesn't work for me. And you think, well, the research says it needs to look like this. And that's where you come into a bit more the real world and the softer skills and the psychology of I need to really understand what this player is going through, which is when I flip back to myself of still being a player, understand I'm on this coach journey. There's a high likelihood of traffic. There's a high likelihood of if we plan to stop here and we know that these are the things available, that might not happen. So we need contingencies. We need other ideas of what we're going to do. We need to get creative, which that's the bit that I really enjoy, just being creative and coming up with a solution to, I know what we're achieving, what we're looking to achieve, and I know that these obstacles are in the way. So what can we do to kind of get around this? And that's the best for me.
I love that because effectively there's no players that are going to say to you, I don't want to improve, especially in the last few minutes of a game.
Yeah.
There's no one that's going to come out with that. But there will be some that will come up with reasons and it may be excuses on why they can't put into place something you're suggesting, isn't there? So as a practitioner, that's the skill, isn't it? To give them a little bit of what they want and then what they need, and then finding somewhere in the middle that you can work together. And I think we can take that, whether you're working in nutrition, whether you're working in the gym, whether you're probably working out on the pitch, it doesn't really matter. That skill is really important, isn't it? To work out how you work with a person. And every, like you mentioned, the three of us, or if you take it wider, 10 players, everyone's going to be a little bit different in terms of their experiences that they've had, maybe culturally around how they've approached food or what they've been told about food and all the rest of it. You throw social media in there, that just blows it up completely, doesn't it? Where they're looking and what they're being influenced by. So no, I think you've done a great job sort of explaining your thought process and how you go around working with players and finding a way of working.
No, I appreciate that. I think, yeah, definitely culture is a massive thing. So for me, I'm from a really mixed background myself. So Nigerian, Barbadian, a lot of Jamaican family, Ghanaian, um, a lot of European family as well, England, Ireland, and then my partner's got Latin America and Southern American family. So I understand loads of different pockets. And then growing up where I did, there was a heavy Asian community. So understanding kind of the different traditions and beliefs around food, it just allows you to kind of tap into things a lot easier where you don't ever want to offend anybody. So you always need to be respectful of what somebody's beliefs are and understanding where that comes from. But then kind of being bold enough to have a conversation and say, well, what can we do around this to just make it a little bit better? We're not trying to get rid of it, but how do we enhance this? And I think sometimes it can be easy to shy away from those conversations or say like, this is what you're doing culturally, and we're just going to stick with that because I don't want to offend you. And it needs to be a sense of, right, it needs tweaking a little bit because it's causing this issue, whether it's increasing our inflammation too much or it's making you too heavy on a match day where you're not able to eat anything else because you've had this meal at whatever time, and then when we're trying to add in some extra fuel, you tapped out. Those conversations are the ones that you're going to make the biggest difference, where it's a little bit more difficult and tricky to kind of navigate around that.
Yeah, it's such an important point. And the other one we've mentioned about like academy players as well. And I know we said about this the sort of family dynamic of the parents, but that's really important as well, isn't it? And I know Jordan would have probably experienced this in academy football, but essentially your parents a lot of the time are preparing the food for you, probably up until a certain age. So they've got some beliefs on what you should and shouldn't be having. So the influence has to, yes, be on the player, but also parents. Whereas people have got pretty strong views on nutrition a lot of the time as well, and where they're getting them from, we could probably debate. But that's then another thing to tackle, isn't it? That it's not always that player that's going to be preparing the food and putting the food on the plate in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the unique thing about nutrition as a discipline within kind of the sports science and support team. Not everybody goes to the gym. Not everybody looks into psychology. Everybody eats.
Yeah.
So everybody has an idea around that and what it should look like. And the other thing that comes into it is also budget. So if you've grown up in a more deprived area or a more working class area, you've not been exposed to certain foods and certain experiences culturally, it can be difficult to try and introduce those. But equally, you might be working with someone that's on a bit of a kind of less of a budget, should I say, and you're trying to get into them all these nutrients, and you have to be again a little bit more creative around it because you don't want to offend anybody and say, "Well, we need you to be eating grass-fed steak, and you need to be eating this," and they're thinking, hold on a minute, this shopping bill now just for the players become £100 a week. I don't have that to spare.
Yeah.
So what we can do around that to make it as best possible within your budget, within your time frame, without offending you, still keeping it. Because for me, if you're not enjoying the food, this is the main thing for me. If you're not enjoying the food, it's absolutely pointless. It's too long of a career and a life to say, I'm just gonna eat dry chicken and rice every day for the rest of my life, and I hate it. I want my players to enjoy the food. I want them to have those social experiences where it's I'm eating with my family or I'm going out with my friends and I'm eating here. We can still do that. It's just we need to have some sort of structure in place that we know when I'm going out for this meal, this is what I'm trying to achieve. So on the menu, these are the things that are probably going to be better for that. So the education around it of this is how we're structuring our plate, this is what we're trying to achieve, and having that communication. So players, especially for me, because I'm not in a club and I'm based kind of remotely, my players are never with me. So it's not like I can oversee everything and say, you need to be having this. I have to have that trust in them. But for me to have the trust, I need to give them the tools and the education that we're both on the same page. They understand this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is roughly how I go about it. So if something does crop up and it's an emergency or a social event that was unplanned or whatever, I know how to navigate it rather than I'm so reliant on, oh, I had this meal plan or it was this real rigid structure, and then something happened and I panicked. I didn't know what to do, and I just reverted to type and went with McDonald's. And it's like, what was the point of all the work we've done if we've not educated the player that they can make decisions themselves? I would say it's similar to like a coach or a manager. You prepare the team for a game, but then aside from subs, there's not a massive amount that you can do on the side other than a few tweaks. You've got to let them go and understand that you've educated them enough to carry out the game plan that you've put in place.
100%. Really good point. Jordan, did you have something then?
Yeah, just I wanted to jump. Well, all of it's amazing, but I think the point you said about logistics and budgets and parents, but obviously not just parents. If you adults and you're buying for yourself as well, um, you see it firsthand, don't you? When we again the logistics and the reality of life, if you want to call it that. We know the research will suggest a good high quality source of protein and protein shakes post session or post match are ideal, and we know at the clubs and unlimited budgets we can pre-make the shakes and give it to the players. But if you say to a parent who might be on a slightly lower income or going on slightly tougher times at the minute and go, oh, could you just buy loads of pre-made shakes or can you get in loads of protein powder? They're going to look at you and go, I can't. But if you can say, well, if you go to the shop after training anyway, you probably buy them a bag of sweets and a fizzy drink. Can you change it to a yuzu or some sort of like, milk-based drink? And it's at least kickstarting some sort of protein synthesis for them after on the way back. And like I'm sure, and again, I'm not going to tell you. I'm sure you've got way better examples than that one. But those little real world solutions, that's what parents and players will buzz off, isn't it? And because just that giving them that, oh yeah, that's a problem I've always faced, and all of a sudden here's the literal solution. It's just such an easy win. I think that'll probably mean a lot to them, like you said, in terms of they'll really buy into that. And I think I love what you said about the education piece there because we all know what it's like in terms of you coming home after a game. We've had it on buses at pro clubs where we'll stop off at a services because it's a 4 hour coach journey on the way back, and the lads are looking at me going at the service station, going, "What can I eat?" And they're looking at going, "Am I allowed to go into Burger King?" And they're all in full club tracksuits, and we're like, "Nah, don't go in there, please, lads. Like, think about it." And then you almost having that realization. You sort of go in. They don't know they don't know what to have. They're led so heavily by us. So that education you're saying there in terms of they know, well, okay, this is a problem. Here's a solution. I don't just need to revert back to type like you said and go into a Mackey's or a Burger King or whatever. So, have you just a final question for me really is like that post-match service station. What's the sort of things you're telling the players you work with? What are you looking for? What sort of advice are you giving to them? Because I know there'll be a lot of listeners who will want to know that. Like when I'm on the road, what can I get into this is going to be better for me than just a fast food.
Again, I think a lot of it comes down into the preparation. So it's not going to be a surprise to you where you're playing. So you've kind of got that information in advance and you can kind of plot roughly the route that you're going to go and where you're going to stop. That's quite available to players. So you can normally look, and the service stations is probably like three types. So you've got really M&S, WH Smith. Some of them have got another supermarket, maybe a Waitrose, depending on where you are in the country. But typically you can find similar things across. So like you're saying, depending on how far into the journey you are, because you've always got recovery wise, you're looking at like the first 4 hours. So we want to have a gram per kilo carbs across the first 4 hours. We want to get some protein in and we want some nutrients in. Depending on how far you're traveling will change what that looks like and your appetite. So on pitch, we're obviously going to be looking at something like a shake because most players, it's rare that I've seen a player that can come off a pitch and go, I can eat straight away.
Mm.
No, your appetite's not there. And it's just convenient anyway. So you imagine like between the final whistle, cool down, team talk, shower, ready, that's about an hour anyway. So you're not going to be sat in the changing room, Gaffer's doing his debrief, and you've got pasta or you've got a rat. It's not going to happen. It's not realistic. So you've got a shake for that first hour, let's say. Normally, depending on level again, you'll be provided food depending on where you are and if you like that food and if we feel like it's helpful to what we're trying to achieve, you might go with the meal there. It might be something that you've taken as a packed lunch, whatever. Probably solids though for that second hour. The third hour, you're generally probably going to be on the road, whether that's your own car, services, whatever. So at that point, we're again looking at we need to get some carbs in. You've probably had two good protein hits. We also want to get some nutrients back into you as well. So I'm really big on fruit salad, that type of thing, because it's reasonably high in carbs. You're getting good nutrients, good colors across. So as nutritionists, we're always saying eat a rainbow every day. So you want to eat as many different colors, fruit and veg as possible, because it will give you the most diverse range of nutrients and allow you to not be deficient in anything. Um, the other choice are going to be wraps, pastas, rice bowls. Sometimes you get the salad bars at the services, rare, but if you can get kind of the salad bars that you might get in like a Morrison's or something like that, and you can make your own, they're perfect for us, that type of thing, and then you can add a protein. Other than that, and there's been times, again, being realistic, where it's a Tuesday night game, you get into the services, it's 1 a.m. Nothing's actually open apart from your Macca's, your Burger King, your KFC. It's food or no food. Food's always going to be better than no food. So at that point, it's then looking at what's the best thing on their menu. So for KFC, for example, you're probably going to look at they do a rice box, I think it
Yeah.
is. There's a bit of salad in there.
Mm.
McDonald's do something similar. Burger King don't really offer much. Burger King's probably the worst of the three. If we're going to be looking at having something that's going to give us something towards what we want. But generally, you're going to find a McDonald's or a KFC. Go with the rice box. The protein's reasonable amount. Carbs, you're getting some form of veg and colour in there, some nutrients. It's better than I had a bargain bucket, which was chips and 10 wings and then a Coke. It's like the nutrient value is minimal
Yeah.
versus like we can actually get something in that's a little bit better. It's not the ideal, but again, we're working in real life. Like this is better than having nothing and waiting 4 hours to get home and thinking, then I'll cook when I get in. It's 5 a.m. No chance. You're going straight to bed. By the time you've woken up, we've gone 10 hours without anything. Your body's absolutely starved and your recovery's been completely compromised. So yeah, it's about making kind of the best of the situation that you've got available. And equally, you can plan everything perfectly and somebody crashes on the motorway and now actually what we plan to do, we're 2 hours off schedule and we've got to go with that anyway. So that's where you have to be a little bit more flexible and understanding of. But I think, like what you said, educating the players is massive. And that realization the first time of how reliant they are on you at the beginning of that journey is very interesting because we had an academy when I was back in uni. We had an academy coming and we're doing a cooking workshop, and this is under 15s. So we're making a stir fry. I said to one of the players, "Go and grab your pepper from over there, and I'll show you how to cut it up." And he comes back. He's got a red onion. So I'm half looking at him and thinking, yeah, he's bantering me like we're gonna laugh in a minute. And then looked at him and I thought he really doesn't know. He really thinks that this is a pepper, and I thought that took me back to being like, wow, we have to educate them from the real basics of how to look after themselves and what stuff is. And that was interesting to learn so early in my career because it kind of informed me a certain way where now, especially with youth players, I'm big on getting those skills into them and cooking yourself and understanding those type of things. Because even at 15, you might only be 2 or 3 years away from you going out on loan and you living on your own. You need to be prepared for that, and you need to be in a situation where just as a human being and as an adult, you can look after yourself and provide for yourself.
There's some absolute gold in there. So, like the realities of the challenges that you face, you've covered that so well, and I'm sure a lot of people will take a hell of a lot from that. I think a lot of it, I'm sure, what you'd encourage is people to take control of those times, wouldn't it, and have things prepared and all the rest of it. But we're also talking about either worst case scenarios or just realistic scenarios that I'm sure many players will find themselves in. I was going to say the good thing is the probably further you go on a journey, the higher up you're playing in certain leagues. Because if you're traveling for a few hours on the way back, obviously you're stretching quite far across the country, but I know what the leagues are like now. You've probably got
Yeah.
a lot of clubs in some of these lower leagues as well that have got fair journeys to cover, and it's not so local. So I think these are really important points that you've brought, both from what you've just mentioned, but also across the episode as well. I think it's been brilliant, Jordan. So I really appreciate you covering everything you have.
No, thank you for having me on. And I think, yeah, just final point, like you said, with the difference in steps and now the way that the leagues have gone with
Yeah.
North South, you've got, I think in the Conference North, so step two, you've got South Shields travelling to Kings Lynn,
Yeah.
which
Yeah. That sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
they're two teams that actually have a decent budget, but other teams that are a bit more limited in budget in that league, and you've got to make a similar journey. Even the coach itself is different. So what's available, microwave, oven, kettle, that informs what you can do as well. Because then you're looking at, I can't heat this up, so what's actually going to be feasible to have cold or that type of thing, or what's not going to spoil. So yeah, I think it's interesting across kind of that's another way that football's changed with the regional leagues are not as regional as they once were.
yeah.
So that's made us have to tweak what we're doing as nutritionists as well.
100%. Jordan, just finish up by giving details like where can people keep up to date with what you got going on? What social media platforms do you use the most?
You can get me on Instagram, so oba.nutrition, oba.nutrition. LinkedIn, I'm quite active on as well, so just Jordan Fagbola. And yeah, if anyone wants to hear from me or needs anything, just send me a message. I'm quite responsive on both.
Brilliant, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. That's been absolutely quality. So thanks a lot for your time.
No, thanks for having me.
Quality, mate.
Jordan, when we're talking about real world nutrition advice, I think we pretty much boxed it off then, didn't we? I think it's really important to cover the different levels that obviously Jordan works with, and yeah, acknowledging some of the real challenges that players are facing, which I think he did absolutely amazing job of doing.
Yeah, I thought it was spot on. That was like so good for players, practitioners, even if you want to go more traditional sports scientists, just to acknowledge and be aware of those challenges, and also for practitioners at clubs. Because let's say you've got a bright under 21s player who's going out on loan to a step three side, or maybe if you're going to lower leagues and League Two, the little bits Jordan was saying about the type of coach you have.
Yeah,
That's really important to know because post match, like again, if you've been on one of the nice coaches which has got a microwave and a little kitchen at the back, it's brilliant because you can heat up. Each player's got a meal. You heat up the meal. You take it to the player. It's class. But if you're on either driving yourself if it's local, or if you're like say on a coach which is just a pure coach, then it's packed lunch vibes and it's stopping off at services and it's getting something at services. Um, so, those little things, they are real world situations. And the big one, which we didn't even talk about, is the youngsters coming from school,
yeah,
going straight to academy training. If they're coming straight from school, not had anything maybe since lunchtime, and let's say they're a 13-year-old kid, and then they're going straight into full intensity training, you're like, they're clearly going to be not right for training.
mm,
And yet we don't even think about that. And some of the best clubs I've either worked out or seen, they will try and provide food before training. They'll try and provide little snacks or whatever, or at least they'll have the conversation, have you eaten anything? Um, and I think it goes by the wayside a little bit, like you were saying about the education stuff that we presume the players know.
mm,
Um, and genuinely, I've had it before where I've spoke to lads in warm ups, match day, under 18s level, by the way, and I've gone, what do you have for breakfast? And they're like, oh, Jordan, feeling a bit like, I'm just feeling a bit off it, and not quite feeling a bit leggy, like a bit lethargic. Oh, what do you have for breakfast? It's like, I didn't really have anything. And I'm like, what do you mean you didn't have anything? And they're like, oh, I just wasn't feeling very hungry today. I'm like, it's a match day. And they're
yeah,
like, yeah, I just didn't want anything. And I'm like scrambling around trying to find them like gels and stuff like this just to get something into them now. And that happens. That happens across the country. And we
yeah,
just, I think, even at the highest level, and that was a Premier League club, we're presuming stuff like that just happens, and it doesn't. And I think it was a really good episode to just give you the realities. And the Tuesday night football is one of the hardest. If ever you played night games as well, you know what it's like when you're trying to sleep. Your legs are twitching. They're still going because you've got the adrenaline in your legs, and you're just trying to. So if you think if you got that going on, plus you've not fueled, plus you didn't get home till 2 a.m. because, like you said, the leagues aren't local. The leagues aren't local. They're all over the place, and not long ago I was signed up to the Step 7 team because I was back trying to play again, and then work got in the way. But that was in the Dorset Premier League, right? Dorset's big. Travel across Dorset is big, and that's not one of the bigger counties. So, you think about away day travel and stuff like this. There's so many things which just this waterfall effect. One thing affects the other, and affects the other, affects the other. So, brilliant episode from Jordan. I definitely think he's one we'll try and get back on to give that perspective from, like an actual player plus practitioner point of view. It's always great when we have guests like that because they give us both sides of the coin. But just final thing from me, I thought the what way he's talking about research, which is fantastic. Research is great, but you take it to a player and that might go out the window within the first 30 seconds. It's got to be applicable to the player in regardless team setting or individual setting. So great job of breaking that all down. Big thanks to Jordan for coming on.
I think the two big standouts for me where he talks about players under fueling and only fueling to about 40 to 50%, which that's when he said like these are easy wins and quick wins as well that we can make. Saturday to Saturday, there could be some big differences made, or Sunday to Sunday, or whenever it is they play, even a week's time, a few days' time, you can make such a big difference with a player. And then the other phrase he used was recovery starts with fueling.
Yeah, I like that one.
So yes, you are fueling, for your performance, but you're also fueling for that recovery period after, which is what Phil Learning spoke about as well. And I know you just referenced night games then. Anyone that's not listened to the first episode that he did a full breakdown of caffeine use and everything around structuring a night game and making sure your recovery is as good as possible for that following day. Because like you just mentioned, the whole thing of getting yourself up for the night game, but then recovering after the night game and pretty much having yourself switch off straight away, which we know doesn't happen, that's a big challenge. So, yeah, I thought there was some absolute gold in there from Jordan, some really good advice. Obviously, everything around the service stations. I never thought we'd be talking about that on the podcast, but it's reality, isn't it? Like, that's where players are going to be seen. I saw on Twitter at the weekend or the weekend before, people throwing a player from a championship club, taking a picture of him ordering some fast food, and, and that all blew up. But that's the reality, isn't it? Like, this is where players are going to end up, and the education part of it is really important. So, no, some really important points there from Jordan. So, yeah, big thanks for your input again. I thought that was quality. And just for everyone listening, make sure to go and check out the sponsors, Hytro, the Good Prep, who prep your food for you, so you can take away that option of ending up in a service station not having your food ready. And also Hawking Dynamic, all massive helps of the podcast. So go and check them out on social media, show them a bit of love and give them a follow. And Jordan, thank you again for joining us. And we'll speak to you again in episode 359.
Look forward to it.